So, you won't believe what happened. It was like any other Thursday, except it totally wasn't. I'm up at the crack of dawn, right? Making pancakes and whatnot for the boys because, mom life. There's my husband, Jake, doing his usual morning flex in the gym. God, those muscles. It's like he's still trying to impress me or something. Cute, but also kinda sad in a way I can't put my finger on. Fast forward a bit, and the kids are up. Joey, the 5-year-old, literally leaps into Jake's arms the second he sees him. Little Mikey, still groggy and all of 2, follows suit. They're laughing. Jake's throwing them up in the air, and it's like one of those perfect family commercials. You know the type. Dinner rolls around, and we're all sitting there. Jake's telling us about his day, all animated, eyes sparkling. The boys are eating it up, but me? I'm just kinda there. It's like I'm watching the scene from outside my body. He's so into his stories, but when's the last time he really talked to me like that? I can't remember. Then the boys go to bed, and the silence hits. We're cleaning up, and I just lose it. Do you even see me anymore, Jake? His face goes blank. I'm ranting about how we don't connect, how he's always busy or tired. He doesn't even argue, just stands there. That silence from him? It's deafening. I tell him I'm going to my folks' place, need some air. But I don't. I end up at this bar, and guess who's there? Dave, his coworker. One thing leads to another, and I'm back at his place. It's reckless, stupid, and it feels like I'm throwing my entire life away for a few hours of feeling wanted. But it's like I'm on autopilot. Can't stop. Don't even want to. The guilt's there, gnawing at me, but so is this thrill. It's messed up, right? I know Jake's been down since his dad passed, and here I am, adding to the pile. But in those moments, none of that matters. It's just me, feeling alive in a way I haven't in years. Next morning, I'm sneaking back home, feeling like the world's biggest cliché. Jake's there, looking so lost and alone. It breaks me, seeing him like that. He tries to smile for the kids, but I can see right through it. And that's just it, isn't it? We're both just going through the motions, pretending everything's fine for the sake of appearances. But it's not. Not even close. And the worst part? I don't know how to stop this train wreck. I'm stuck on this track, speeding towards something awful, and I can't find the brakes. You ever wake up feeling like you've made the biggest mistake of your life, but also kinda wanting to do it again? Yeah. That was me, tangled up in someone else's sheets, heart racing and filled with regret, but also not. The night with Dave, my husband's coworker, was like something out of a twisted fantasy. Wrong on so many levels, yet it felt insanely right in the moment. Dragging myself out of bed, I couldn't shake off the guilt. It clung to me tighter than my own skin. Heading home, I was a mess of nerves. Jake, my husband, he's been carrying the world on his shoulders since his dad passed away, and here I was, about to dump a whole universe of hurt on him. Or so I thought. Walking through our front door, the sight of Jake trying to keep things normal for our boys nearly broke me. He looked so worn out, yet there he was, making breakfast, being super dad. It tore at me, seeing him like that. I wanted to confess, to spill everything, but the words just wouldn't come out. Instead, I chose silence, telling myself it was to protect him, but who was I kidding? Things got weirder at the family barbecue the following weekend. Dave was there, and our eyes locked like two magnets. Every glance was a silent conversation about that night. It was torture, not just because of the guilt, but because part of me wanted him again. And wouldn't you know it, that part won. We found ourselves back in each other's arms, the thrill of the forbidden driving us, each secret meetup more intense than the last. It was like we were addicted to the danger of it all. But with every kiss, every touch, the weight of what I was doing got heavier. Then, there were the signs. Jake, he's not a dumb guy. He started noticing things. Little pauses in conversations, awkward glances between me and Dave, my random disappearances. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. One day, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table, looking like he'd just gone 10 rounds with life and lost. He'd been putting pieces together. Dave's sketchy excuses, my sudden late nights. Jake asked straight up if there was someone else. The look in his eyes, it was like he already knew, but he needed to hear it from me. I couldn't lie. Not anymore. The truth came out in a flood, and the devastation on his face was something I'll never forget. It was the moment everything changed. Our world, once so full of love and laughter, crumbled right there. And it was all on me. Man, where do I even start? Picture this. A showdown straight out of a drama series, but it's my life. Jake, that's my husband, decides he's had enough of the dodgy vibes and goes straight to the source. Dave, his coworker, and yeah, the guy the first messed up with. So, Jake corners Dave at work, all stern and detective-like, demanding the truth. Dave's face goes white, and there's this moment, right? A moment where everything hangs in the balance. Then, he spills it. Everything. Tries to play it off as a one-time mistake, but we both know it's more than that. Jake comes home that night, and I can tell he knows. It's written all over him, the hurt, the anger. I've never seen him like that. He confronts me, and it's like the world stops spinning. Is it true? He asks, voice barely a whisper. I nod, and the look on his face, it shatters me. Our oldest, Joey, he picks up on it right away. Kids are smart, you know? He comes up, all innocent, asking why we're so sad. It's a punch to the gut, hearing him say that. Jake and I just look at each other, lost. No words can fix this. Things spiral from there. Jake packs a bag and says he needs space. Watching him walk out that door, I feel this part of me just break. The house feels empty, the silence louder than any argument we've ever had. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the whispers start. Friends, family, even people I barely know, they're all talking about it. My affair isn't just a secret anymore, it's public gossip. Invites dry up, calls go unanswered. My world, which used to be so full, is now just empty. This whole mess, it's like a bad dream I can't wake up from. I keep hoping I'll open my eyes and everything will be back to normal. But it's not a dream, is it? It's my reality, and I'm living it every single day. You know that feeling when you're clawing at the walls, trying to climb out of a hole you've dug yourself into? That was me, trying to patch things up with Jake after the whole affair bombshell. So, I throw out this lifeline: counseling. To my shock, he agrees. There's this glimmer of hope, like maybe, just maybe, we can fix this mess. Counseling was like ripping off a band-aid to find a wound still festering. We're digging into our marriage like it's a crime scene, uncovering stuff that's uncomfortable and ugly. The affair? Yeah, it's a big deal, but turns out, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Every session feels like we're moving 2 steps back, and it's draining, soul-sucking even. Amidst all this, I find myself backsliding. The progress with Jake is so slow, so freaking painful, that I'm seeking escape. And yeah, you guessed it, I end up back with Dave. It's like I'm on this self-destruct loop, knowing full well I'm messing up, but doing it anyway. The thrill, the escape, it's intoxicating, but in the worst possible way. Then, the bomb drops. Jake confronts me, his face a mixture of rage and heartbreak. He's got proof of me and Dave, thanks to a tracker he put on my phone. Talk about trust being shattered, right? The look in his eyes, it's something I'll never forget. He's hurt, betrayed, and there's this silence that's louder than any words could be. He lays it down straight: it's him or Dave. My stomach knots because deep down, I know. I know I've already made my choice, and it's not the one I vowed to spend my life with. Telling Jake I choose Dave, it's like I'm watching myself from outside my body, wondering who the hell I've become. Choosing Dave feels like freedom in the moment, like I'm finally being honest with myself. But watching Jake's reaction, the way his face just crumbles, it's a punch to the gut. I've hurt him, our kids, everyone around us. And for what? A fling that felt like love, but was probably just a desperate grasp at feeling alive? So there it is, the whole sordid tale. I took a gamble on something new, thinking it was love, only to realize too late that the cost was everything I held dear. Jake, the man who stood by me through thick and thin, deserved better. And me? I'm left wondering how I let myself get here, and whether I'll ever find my way back from this. You think you've heard it all, but trust me, it gets worse. The custody battle for my boys kicks off, and it's like World War III in the courtroom. Every accusation Jake throws my way cuts deeper than the last. It's brutal, watching the man I once loved paint me as the villain in front of a judge. Then there's life with Dave. Moving in with him felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild from the rubble of my old life. But let me tell you, the shine wears off real quick. The excitement of sneaking around is gone, and what's left is just real life, with a guy who's starting to show his not-so-great side. Friends? Family? Yeah. They're pretty much ghosts now. My actions have turned me into a pariah. Even my own parents can barely look at me. The disappointment, the silence, it's deafening. Dave was supposed to be my silver lining, but turns out, he's just another cloud. Visits with my boys are the hardest. They're confused, hurt, and every hug they give their dad feels like a knife in my back. They don't understand why things have changed, and I can't even begin to explain it to them without feeling like the worst person alive. And the financial strain? Let's just say that the lavish lifestyle I'd envisioned with Dave is more of a fantasy than reality. The divorce settlement hits hard, and suddenly, I'm counting pennies, trying to make ends meet. So much for escaping into a better life. But wait, there's more. Jake, in a bid to protect our kids from my instability, files for sole custody. The court battle that ensues is nothing short of a nightmare. Every time I think it can't get any worse, it does. As if the personal fallout isn't enough, the affair and divorce become the talk of the town. No, the internet. My name is mud, dragged through the digital streets of social media. My professional reputation? Tanked. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion, except I'm the driver. Let me tell you, hitting rock bottom doesn't even come close to describing where I ended up. It's like I was living in this constant state of regret, each day heavier than the last. The choices I made, the lies, the betrayal, it all started weighing on me, suffocating me. My so-called new life with Dave was falling apart at the seams, and the joy I thought I'd find? Non-existent. One night, it hit me hard. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized the magnitude of what I'd lost. Jake, with his unwavering kindness and the love he had for our boys, suddenly seemed like the only real thing I'd ever had. The regret was this tangible thing, eating away at me. I wondered how I could have been so blind. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, Dave decides he's had enough. Says he's feeling trapped, misses the excitement we had when it was all a secret. Just like that, he's gone, chasing after someone new, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. Again. The custody battle was the final nail in the coffin. The judge's decision to grant Jake full custody of our boys felt like a physical blow. My heart broke, not just for me but for the relationship I'd severed with my children. The limited visits felt like a mercy I didn't deserve, each one a reminder of the family I'd torn apart. Desperate for any sort of connection, I confronted Jake. I begged, pleaded for forgiveness, for a chance to be a part of their lives again. But I could see it in his eyes, the resolve, the need to protect our children from the storm that was me. His no was gentle but firm, a door closing on what could have been. So there I was, utterly alone. The family I'd abandoned, the friends who'd turned their backs, the lover who'd left me in the dust. It all culminated in this overwhelming sense of isolation. My choices had led me here, to a life void of the love and warmth I'd once taken for granted. In a last-ditch effort, I reached out, tried to mend fences with anyone willing to listen. But the doors were closed, the bridges burned. My actions were unforgivable, and the loneliness that followed was a constant companion. So, picture this. Me, trying to hit the reset button on my life. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Every time I try to take a step forward, it's like my past is right there, ready to yank me back. Job interviews? Forget about it. The moment they Google my name, it's game over. Friends? More like ghosts of friendship past. Then there are the nights. Man, those nights are the worst. It's just me and my thoughts, replaying every single mistake I've made. It's like my brain's got this highlight reel of my life's lowest points, and it's on constant replay. The loneliness is a given, but the regret? That's the kicker. Losing my identity was a trip, too. Who am I if not Jake's wife or the kid's mom? Just thinking about it feels like I'm trying to solve one of those puzzles where the pieces don't fit anymore. And let me tell you, looking in the mirror hasn't gotten any easier. What I see staring back at me is a stranger, someone who made one bad decision after another until everything she cared about was gone. Social isolation? Oh, I've got that in spades. It's like I've got this sign on my back, stay away. Trust me, it's for your own good. My social life's turned into this endless loop of Netflix and chilling with, well, just me. And not the fun kind of chilling either. But there was this moment, right? A moment of truth when I looked in the mirror and really saw myself for the first time since this whole mess started. The damage I'd done, the pain I'd caused, it was all there, written on my face. I knew then that no amount of, I'm sorry, could fix what I'd broken. So, I started volunteering, trying to find some kind of redemption, to prove to myself, and maybe the world, that I wasn't just a walking disaster. But every time I tried to help, I could see it in their eyes, the judgment, the weariness. It's like my past was this shadow I couldn't shake off, no matter how hard I tried. Walking through the city, seeing life go on around me, it hit me hard. I'd lost everything because of my choices. My family, my friends, my sense of self, all casualties of a war I'd started with a single, selfish decision. And the worst part? I knew there was no going back. Some bridges, once burned, are just too damaged to rebuild. Accepting that? It's been the hardest part of this whole journey. Knowing that I'm the architect of my own misery, that's a pill no one wants to swallow. But here I am, taking it one bitter day at a time, learning to live with the consequences of a life that could have been so different if only I'd made better. The first time I met Ethan, it felt like I'd been struck by lightning. Not the destructive kind, but the sort that lights up everything around you, making the world seem brighter, more vibrant. I was coming off a string of meaningless hookups, each one leaving me more jaded than the last. Then Ethan walked into my life with his easy smile and a heart so open it made me want to believe in something as naive as true love again. We hit it off instantly. It wasn't just attraction, it was as if our souls had known each other for lifetimes. Months flew by in a blissful haze, and before I knew it, I was saying those 3 words I thought I'd barricaded away for good. I love you, I whispered to Ethan one night, under a sky heavy with stars, his arms wrapped around me in a promise of forever. He brought out a version of me I thought was lost, a version of me that believed in love, in us. But life has a cruel way of testing what we hold dearest. Ethan's job whisked him away to another city, turning our once inseparable bond into a long-distance challenge. We promised to make it work, plastering over the cracks with video calls and weekend visits. Yet, the void his absence left in my daily life was palpable. Enter Leo, a new coworker with a laugh as infectious as his personality. We became fast friends, finding solace in each other's company amidst the monotony of work. Leo was everything Ethan wasn't, unpredictable, thrilling, right there. He filled the Ethan-shaped hole in my life, and before I knew it, I was rationalizing an affair as just a temporary fix. A way to feel less alone. I spun a web of lies, telling Leo that Ethan and I were in an open relationship. It was easier than admitting the truth, even to myself. The affair became my secret escape, a place where I didn't have to face the loneliness waiting for me at home. But Ethan wasn't fooled. His voice on the phone turned cautious, probing. "Is everything okay, Anna? You seem distant." I could hear the worry lacing his words, a silent acknowledgement of the growing chasm between us. My assurances did little to mask the guilt that clung to my every word, a constant reminder of the double life I was leading. As Ethan's suspicions grew, so did my desperation to cling to the fragments of our relationship. But with every lie I told Leo, every pretend smile I flashed Ethan over video calls, the heavier my heart grew. I was trapped in a web of my own making, torn between the comfort of my past and the excitement of the present. The truth was, I was addicted to the thrill Leo offered, a thrill so intoxicating it made me forget the reasons I fell for Ethan in the first place. But as the lies multiplied and the truth threatened to surface, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to lose everything I ever cared about, for a fleeting moment of excitement that was never meant to last. The world seemed to shrink to the space between Leo and me, his gaze pinning me with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. "Where do we stand, Anna?" he asked, his voice a mix of hope and caution. The question, simple yet loaded, dangled in the air like a guillotine. I knew then that my tangled web of lies was about to ensnare me. Leo, with his earnest eyes and dreams of a future together, deserved more than the half-truths I'd been feeding him. But admitting the full extent of my deceit meant facing the ugliness of my actions head-on. I made my choice in a moment that felt both impulsive and inevitable. "I want to be with you, Leo," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. The decision to leave Ethan for Leo was intoxicating, a rush of adrenaline that blurred the lines between right and wrong. Leo's smile, wide and genuine, was all the confirmation I needed that I'd made the right choice. But beneath the euphoria, a nagging sense of guilt lurked, uninvited and ignored. Breaking up with Ethan over the phone was the coward's way out, and I knew it. My words were clinical, detached, as if I was discussing someone else's life. "Ethan, I can't do this anymore," I said, the truth tasting bitter in my mouth. His silence was deafening, a void where I'd expected anger or pleas for an explanation. Instead, there was only a resigned sigh, the sound of a heart breaking quietly on the other end of the line. The aftermath was a mess of emotions and unanswered questions. Ethan, in his pain, sought understanding, a way to make sense of the senseless. Our conversation the next day was a marathon of confessions and apologies, a cathartic release for emotions too long bottled up. I admitted to everything, the affair with Leo, the lies, my reasons and justifications, all laid bare. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm a liar, and I've hurt you in ways I can never undo," I confessed, the words scraping raw against my throat. His response was not what I expected. There was no anger, no accusations. Just a quiet acceptance that chilled me to the bone. "I just wish you had been honest with me," he said, his voice heavy with unshed tears. It was a conversation that marked the end of us, a closure that offered no comfort, only the stark realization of the damage I'd caused. In the days that followed, I told myself I would work on my issues, that I would become someone worthy of love and trust. Yet, as I watched Ethan retreat into his work, putting distance between us with a professionalism that masked his pain, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss. My betrayal had not just ended our relationship, it had irrevocably changed him, turning the man I loved into a stranger. Ethan's attempt to move on was a mirror to my own struggle with guilt and self-loathing. I saw him throw himself into his job, each achievement a step away from me and the havoc I'd wreaked in his life. It was a haunting reminder of the cost of my actions, a price paid not just by me but by the one person who had loved me unconditionally. The thrill had worn off, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of regret and loneliness. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadowy contours of my room feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. Leo, who once seemed like a beacon of excitement, had become distant, his patience worn thin by my inability to fully commit, my heart still tangled in the remnants of what I had with Ethan. I couldn't shake the memories of Ethan's unwavering support, his understanding nature that had once been my rock. In stark contrast, Leo's charm had begun to reveal cracks, his once exciting unpredictability now a source of anxiety. He lacked the depth of empathy Ethan had offered freely, making me realize the gravity of what I'd lost. Driven by a mix of desperation and longing, I reached out to Ethan, hoping to glimpse the life I'd thrown away. But the man I met was not the Ethan I remembered. He had changed, his aura now one of strength and self-assurance that I had never contributed to. It was clear he had moved on, finding solace in new hobbies and friendships that had allowed him to rebuild the self-esteem I had shattered. Our encounter was brief, the chasm between us wider than I had anticipated. Ethan was polite, but his eyes were guarded, a clear barrier to any hope of reconciliation. The realization that I was truly alone hit me like a physical blow. Not long after, Leo ended things between us, his words a final nail in the coffin of our relationship. "I can't do this anymore, Anna. You're never fully here, always lost in what you had with Ethan. And your lies. I can't trust you," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held. I was left reeling, abandoned by the very person I had sacrificed everything for. The confrontation with Ethan came unexpectedly. He sought me out, not out of a desire to reconcile, but to express the pain and betrayal he had endured. "I needed to do this for myself, to close this chapter for good," he said, his voice steady and resolute. He spoke of the hurt, the lies, and the betrayal, but also of healing and moving forward. It was a conversation that offered no solace, only a stark reflection of the damage I had caused. Left to confront the wreckage of my actions, I was forced to face the truth of my self-destruction. The realization that I had not only lost the love of my life but had also pushed away a potentially good thing with Leo left me in a state of profound solitude. The pain of my choices became a constant companion, a reminder of the cost of my selfishness. In the silence of my room, with nothing but my thoughts for company, I began to reflect on the path that led me here. The excitement of the affair, the allure of something new, had blinded me to the beauty of what I already had. My actions, driven by a need to escape the perceived mundanity of commitment, had led me to this point of no return. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of my choices, a realization that the thrill I sought was fleeting, but the scars it left were permanent. Alone, with nothing but regret to fill the void, I understood the depth of my folly, mourning the loss of a love that was once mine to cherish. The day I started therapy was the day I finally admitted to myself that I was the common denominator in a long line of failed relationships. Sitting in that too quiet room, facing a stranger who held my fragile hopes of change in her hands, I felt the weight of my past decisions like never before. It was a humbling realization, one that came not a moment too soon. "I need to understand why I do the things I do," I confessed, the words tasting like the first step on a long road to redemption. Meanwhile, Ethan was flourishing, his life a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I heard through the grapevine of his promotions, of the new love in his life, and though each piece of news twisted a knife in my heart, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for him. He had moved beyond the shadow of our past, finding happiness and success that was no longer tainted by my betrayal. The contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. My attempts at reaching out to Ethan were met with polite, but firm rejection. "I've moved on, Anna. I wish you all the best," he told me, his voice void of the warmth it once carried. It was a necessary but painful closure, a door firmly shut on any fantasy of reconciliation I might have harbored. In therapy, I began to unravel the threads of my behavior, tracing the patterns back to their origins. It was a painful process, confronting the truth that I had sabotaged not just my relationship with Ethan but nearly every meaningful connection I'd ever had. "You've been repeating a cycle, Anna," my therapist pointed out, her words a mirror reflecting a truth I could no longer ignore. As Ethan's star rose, mine seemed to dim. Leo, once an ally and confidant in my professional life, distanced himself, the repercussions of my personal decisions bleeding into my career. Opportunities dried up, and I found myself on the outskirts of the network I had once been central to. It was a sobering reminder that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences extend far beyond the confines of our personal lives. Ethan's ability to find closure and rebuild his life served as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale. It forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth that his healing had nothing to do with me. I was not the architect of his recovery, I was the chaos he had overcome. This realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also marked a turning point in my own journey towards understanding and, hopefully, forgiveness. Alone, both professionally and personally, I was forced to reckon with the reality of my situation. The loneliness was crushing, but it was also a catalyst for genuine change. I was no longer the woman who sought escape in the arms of another or the comfort of lies. I was someone who recognized her faults, who was fighting to break free of the patterns that had defined her for too long. In the quiet of my apartment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. It was marked by loss and regret, but also by growth and a glimmer of hope. Ethan had found his peace, and now, it was time for me to find mine. Not in the arms of another or the accolades of a career, but in the hard, unglamorous work of self-improvement and accountability. It was a daunting path, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to walk it. The moment I realized I was utterly alone wasn't marked by some grand event. It was the quiet accumulation of ignored calls and unreturned messages that finally made it clear. Friends, colleagues, even casual acquaintances seemed to have collectively decided I was persona non grata, a reality that hit me like a ton of bricks. It was as if the world had moved on, leaving me stranded on an island of my own making, surrounded by the debris of burned bridges and lost opportunities. Meanwhile, Ethan's life was on an upward trajectory, a stark contrast to the downward spiral mine had become. I heard through mutual friends, the few who still spoke to me, about his newfound happiness. Ethan had met someone new, a woman named Claire, who was everything I wasn't, trustworthy, stable, and kind. The news should have cut me, but instead, I found a twisted sense of relief in it. Ethan deserved happiness, even if it wasn't with me. The realization that Ethan had moved on for good came into sharp focus when I learned of his engagement. The news was a sobering reminder of all I had lost and all he had gained from our painful parting. Ethan's ability to trust and love again after everything we'd been through was a testament to his strength, a quality I had once admired and later taken for granted. My professional life, once a source of pride and accomplishment, had crumbled alongside my personal relationships. Without the network I had so carelessly alienated, job opportunities became scarce, and financial stability turned into a day-to-day struggle. The luxury and security I once knew felt like distant memories, replaced by the stark reality of overdue bills and mounting debts. In a last-ditch effort to salvage some semblance of my former life, I reached out to those I had wronged, hoping for forgiveness, or at least understanding. But the doors I knocked on remained closed, the damage I had done apparently too deep for apologies to mend. It was a humbling experience, one that forced me to confront the consequences of my actions head-on. Despite everything, I clung to the hope that my attempts at redemption would someday bear fruit, that the lessons I was learning the hard way would lead to a better, more honest version of myself. But as Ethan's wedding day approached, a day filled with celebration and love, I couldn't help but feel the full weight of my isolation. The news of Ethan's marriage, a union celebrated by friends and family, was a poignant reminder of the life I could have had, a life filled with love and companionship, had I not let my own selfish desires lead me astray. Watching from the outskirts, unable to share in the joy, I was reminded of the cost of my choices, not just to myself, but to the man I had once loved and the life we could have built together. Alone, I reflected on the path that had brought me here, the series of choices that had seemed so inconsequential at the time but had led to my undoing. It was a bitter pill to swallow, the the realization that I was the architect of my own downfall. But in that solitude, I also found a glimmer of hope. The road to redemption was long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, I was ready to walk it, not for Ethan, not for anyone else, but for myself. From the window of a cramped apartment halfway across the world, I watched the sunset bleed into the horizon, a fiery end to yet another day spent running from the past. My journey, a desperate attempt at self-discovery, had taken me to the far corners of the earth, searching for something, anything, that might fill the void Ethan's absence had left in my life. But with each new city, each fleeting connection, the realization grew stronger: you can't outrun your own shadow. Back home, Ethan's life was flourishing. I heard about his latest promotion through the digital grapevine, a testament to his dedication and resilience. It was a bittersweet pill to swallow, knowing his success was built on the ruins of what we once shared. Yet, there was a part of me that swelled with pride for him. Ethan had always been destined for greatness, and I, in my selfishness, could have been the anchor that dragged him down. My own descent into obscurity was as swift as it was merciless. The vibrant social life I once boasted, filled with friends and admirers, had dwindled to nothingness. My actions, once excused as youthful indiscretions, had finally caught up with me, leaving me isolated in a self-made purgatory of regret and what-ifs. Through snippets of conversations and online updates, I learned of Ethan's growing family. The joy and fulfillment he found in fatherhood were emotions I had once dreamed of sharing with him. Instead, I was a spectator to his happiness, a ghost haunting the edges of a life I had forfeited the right to be a part of. My travels, initially a quest for enlightenment, had become a mirror reflecting the inescapable truth: wherever you go, there you are. My problems, insecurities, and regrets had packed themselves along for the ride, steadfast companions on a journey that promised much but delivered little. Ethan's reflection on the past, shared in a rare moment of online vulnerability, struck a chord deep within me. He spoke of the pain and betrayal, but also of growth and gratitude. His words were a reminder of the strength found in forgiveness, both of oneself and others. It was a lesson I was still learning, one painful step at a time. My return home was not the triumphant comeback I had envisioned. Instead, it was a quiet acknowledgement of defeat, a surrender to the reality that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. My attempts at self-improvement, while sincere, had barely scratched the surface of the deep-seated issues that drove me to sabotage everything good in my life. Sitting alone in the apartment that had once been our home, I was confronted with the totality of my loss. Ethan had moved on, building a life rich with love and success, while I was stuck in a limbo of my own making. The realization was a gut punch, a wake-up call to the fact that true change requires more than a change of scenery; it demands a transformation of the soul. As the night deepened, wrapping the world in its silent embrace, I understood that the journey ahead was mine alone to make. It was time to stop running, to face the demons of my past with courage and humility. The road to redemption was long and uncertain, but for the first time, I felt ready to take the first step. Not for Ethan, not for anyone else, but for myself. Because in the end, the only way out of the darkness is through it, one small, faltering step at a time. The morning sun barely crept through the curtains, casting a soft light that did little to warm the chill in my heart. With each passing day, the weight of my past decisions grew heavier, a constant reminder of everything I'd lost. From my vantage point, Ethan's life seemed to be a series of triumphs, each milestone a stark contrast to the stagnation of my own. I heard about his latest promotion through the grapevine, a testament to his hard work and resilience, qualities I once admired up close, and now from a distance, with a mix of pride and sorrow. As Ethan's life blossomed, mine seemed to shrink. The vibrant social circle that once revolved around me had dissipated, leaving behind a void filled with echoes of laughter and conversations that no longer reached my ears. My attempts to escape the consequences of my actions led me on a solo journey, a desperate search for redemption and self-discovery. But no matter how far I traveled, the shadows of my past loomed larger, a stark reminder that running from oneself is a race you can never win. Meanwhile, Ethan's journey took a different path. He found contentment, a peace that seemed unattainable to me. His experiences with me, once a source of pain, had faded into a chapter closed long ago. Ethan had moved on, building a family and experiencing the joys and challenges of a life I once dreamed of sharing with him. His ability to give so freely of himself, volunteering and donating to causes, underscored the vast gulf between us. His generosity was a reflection of his character, a stark contrast to selfishness that had defined my actions. In moments of quiet reflection, I faced the harsh truth of my continued struggle. My life, a series of half-hearted attempts at change, seemed to be a perpetual cycle of regret and isolation. The clarity I longed for remained elusive, a fleeting shadow always just out of reach. It was during one of these moments that I realized the change I so desperately sought had to come from within. But the path to true transformation was obscured by doubt and fear, leaving me to wonder if I was capable of such profound self-reinvention. Driven by a newfound resolve, I reached out, attempting to reconnect with the friends I had wronged, including Ethan. My efforts, however, were met with silence or polite refusals. The doors I had hoped to open remained firmly shut, my past actions casting a long shadow that time had yet to dispel. Ethan, in particular, remained an enigma, his life flourishing in ways that both heartened and haunted me. His ability to overcome the betrayal and find happiness was a testament to his strength, a quality that had drawn me to him and now kept me at bay. In the solitude of my reflections, I confronted the painful truth of my journey. The realization that honesty, fidelity, and the courage to face one's flaws were not just virtues but necessities. My chance at happiness with Ethan, lost forever to a past marred by deception and selfishness, was a lesson learned too late. As I pondered the ruins of what could have been, I understood that the path to redemption was mine to walk alone. Ethan's triumph over the past was not just a story of resilience but a beacon of hope for those willing to confront their darkest selves. Alone, yet surrounded by the remnants of my choices, I faced an uncertain future. The clarity I had sought, the moment of true understanding, had finally arrived, albeit at a great cost. My journey forward was unclear, but the first steps toward genuine change had been taken. In the quiet aftermath of my solitary reflections, I embraced the daunting task ahead, a journey not toward Ethan or the life we once shared, but toward a better version of myself, one step. Right from the get-go, I knew I was playing with fire. There I was, in this bustling city restaurant, laughter and clinking glasses setting the stage for what was about to unfold. Mark, an old college flame turned unexpected dinner guest, was back in town. Just for a few days, he said, but his eyes told a different story. David, my husband, was on a business call, too caught up to notice the exchange of numbers under the table. It's harmless, I told myself, silencing the alarm bells in my head. Fast forward to the next week, Mark and I found ourselves at this cozy little cafe downtown, hidden away from prying eyes. His jokes weren't that funny, but there I was, laughing like he was the comedian of the year. Guilt nagged at me, but I shoved it aside, convincing myself it was just friendly banter over coffee. Then came David's surprise, an anniversary trip to Italy, all planned out with the kind of attention to detail that made me fall in love with him all over again. My heart skipped a beat, not just with excitement but with a pang of guilt so sharp it almost made me confess right then and there. Almost. We need this, I thought, pushing away the guilt and focusing on the Italian sunsets we'd soon be watching together. But life, with its twisted sense of humor, had other plans. David had to leave on a business trip, and loneliness crept in like an unwelcome guest. So, I did what any reasonable person would do, I invited Mark over, telling myself it was just to fill the silence David left behind. We shared a bottle of wine, one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was the one leaning in for a kiss. The regret hit me instantly, a sobering slap to the face. It was just a moment of weakness, I rationalized, trying to stitch the rip in the fabric of my marriage with excuses. The guilt was a relentless shadow the next day. In a desperate attempt to lighten its grip, I bought David an expensive watch. a peace offering to the gods of guilt, I joked to myself, knowing well that no gift could erase what I had done. Lisa, my best friend in the human lie detector, didn't take long to pick up on the tension. "What's going on with you?" she pressed, her gaze piercing. Cornered, I confessed, dressing my betrayal in words of regret and meaningless promises. It meant nothing, I insisted, but the weight of my actions lay heavy on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the line I had crossed. Each step, every decision, felt like walking on a tightrope. With each action, I was weaving a web of lies and deceit, unaware of just how entangled I was about to become. The moment David found that receipt, something shifted between us. He came to me, eyes gleaming with something I hadn't seen in a while, hope, maybe? He whispered plans of a surprise dinner at our favorite spot downtown, the one with the twinkling fairy lights and the jazz band that played on Fridays. It was touching, really, how a simple gesture could mean so much. But as he spoke, the weight of my secret felt heavier than ever. Dinner night arrived, and it was like stepping back in time. David was all charm and smiles, pulling out my chair, toasting to us. "I'm so lucky to have you, Anna. You're not just my wife. You're my best friend," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Each word was a dagger. I wanted to confess, to shout out my betrayal right there and then. But fear clamped my mouth shut, and all I could do was nod, a hollow smile plastered on my face. That night, lying awake next to David, the guilt became unbearable. I grabbed my phone and typed out a message to Mark, my fingers trembling. "We can't see each other anymore. Please, let's just forget all this happened," sent. It felt like the right thing to do, but the anxiety of waiting for his response was excruciating. The response came, not from Mark, but in the form of silence. The next day, David was unusually quiet, and when I came home from work, I found him standing in the kitchen, a storm brewing in his eyes. The table was littered with printed screenshots of every message, every promise, every lie. My heart stopped. "David, I began, but the words died in my throat." He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just looked at me, the hurt in his eyes saying more than words ever could. "How could you, Anna?" That's all he managed before he walked away, leaving me alone with the mess I'd made. The air felt thick, charged with a silence that screamed louder than any argument. That night, David moved his things into the guest bedroom. The door clicked shut, a symbolic closing of the chapter we'd written together. Our home turned into a cold, silent shell almost overnight. Meals were eaten in silence, if at all. Attempts at conversation died before they could take root. The man I loved, the man I had hurt, was now a stranger living under the same roof, and the space between us felt like miles. In a last-ditch effort to mend the widening gap between us, I turned to the one thing I knew could speak when words failed me: food. I spent hours in the kitchen, cooking up David's favorite dish, the aroma filling the house with memories of better times. But when he came home, he barely glanced at the spread before muttering something about a meeting and disappearing into the night. The untouched meal sat on the table, a silent testament to the chasm between us. Feeling more alone than ever, I called Lisa, my voice barely a whisper as I recounted the night's events. "Give him space, Anna. He needs time," she advised, her voice a mix of sympathy and pragmatism. But time felt like the enemy, each tick of the clock a reminder of the distance growing between us. David's late nights became the norm, his side of the bed cold and empty. One day, while picking up his suit for the dry cleaner, a receipt fell out, a dinner for one. The reality hit me hard. Not only was he avoiding me, but he was also erasing me from his routines, his life. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying each mistake, each lie, until the early hours of the morning. The bed felt too big, the silence too loud, and my thoughts too chaotic. The discovery of a business card for a divorce lawyer among David's things felt like a punch to the gut. My hands shook as I traced the embossed letters, the finality of the situation sinking in. Panic set in, a constant, gnawing presence in the pit of my stomach. In a moment of sheer desperation, I poured my heart into a letter to David. It was an apology, a plea for forgiveness, an acknowledgement of my mistakes. I left it on his pillow, a paper bridge trying to span the gulf between us. Days passed with no acknowledgement of the letter. Then, one morning, I noticed his suitcase by the door. "Business trip," he said, his voice void of any warmth. The letter remained untouched on his pillow, a symbol of my failed attempt at reconciliation. When I found the letter days later, still sealed, still unread, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. The hope I'd clung to, fragile and fleeting, dissolved into the reality of our fractured lives. The morning I tried to break the ice, to shatter the silence that had cocooned us, David was as unreachable as ever. "Can we talk about us? About what happens next?" I ventured, my voice barely above a whisper. His response was a detached, "I need time to think," that echoed off the walls, leaving me grappling with the enormity of our situation. Later, I found his wedding ring, once a symbol of our endless love, carelessly left in the drawer of his nightstand. The sight of it, lying there devoid of its purpose, hit me like a physical blow. It was a silent declaration of his detachment, a realization that chilled me to the bone. David's life without me began to take shape on social media, of all places. Pictures of him with friends, smiling, the kind of genuine happiness I hadn't seen in months, plastered across my screen. Each post, each photo, was a stark reminder of the widening gap between us, of a life I was no longer a part of. One evening, I overheard him on the phone, laughter bubbling through in a way that used to be reserved for us. It was a sound that had become foreign in our home, and it underscored the profound loss and isolation that had taken root in my heart. The final blow came when I stumbled upon a job offer from another city on his laptop. It wasn't just any job, but a chance for him to escape, to start anew without the shadows of my betrayal. "It's a fresh start," he'd later explain, the words hanging between us, heavy with unspoken finality. I confronted him, desperation seeping through my words. "Please, don't do this. Don't leave." But David, ever the enigma, gave nothing away, his plans as indecipherable as his feelings. The distance between us became tangible when he began to move his belongings out of our bedroom. I reached out, a feeble attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us, but he brushed me off, his actions speaking louder than any words could. Then, the undeniable proof that this wasn't just a scare tactic or a desperate plea for attention, the apartment listing on his laptop. "A place for one, a life without me." The realization left me gasping, a fish out of water, struggling to come to terms with the inevitable. When David finally broke the silence about his decision, it was with a clinical detachment. "I've accepted the job, I'm moving in a month," he stated, suggesting we start discussing separation formally. The words were a cold, hard slap, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. Each action, each decision, was a step towards an irreparable divide. The man I loved, the life we shared, was slipping through my fingers like grains of sand, leaving me grappling with the wreckage of a love story that had turned into a cautionary tale of loss and regret. The mediator's office was sterile, every surface gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights, mirroring the clinical detachment of the conversation. David and I sat on opposite sides of the table, a gulf of unspoken words between us. He wouldn't meet my eyes, the man I'd shared a life with now just another stranger. As we dissected our lives into assets and liabilities, the finality of it all sunk in. Returning home felt different after that. The absence of David's things, a missing pair of shoes, the empty space in the closet, was jarring. Each missing item was a stark reminder of the chasm our marriage had fallen into, a once shared life now being meticulously divided and packed away. David's last week at home was a ghostly presence. He'd slip out before dawn and return after I'd gone to bed, our interactions reduced to the bare minimum. The silence was oppressive, a constant reminder of the distance that had wedged itself between us. Determined to find some semblance of closure, I woke up early on his last day, hoping to bridge the gap with a farewell breakfast. But David was already gone, the bed next to me cold and untouched. The effort felt futile, a last grasp at a connection that had long since slipped through my fingers. His goodbye was a simple note left on the kitchen counter: "Take care of yourself." The words were a tender knife twist, a goodbye devoid of anger or bitterness, just a resigned acceptance of our end. It was quintessentially David, and it broke me. I watched from the window as the moving truck swallowed the last of our shared life. David directed the movers with a calm efficiency, his back to me, a physical representation of our emotional divide. The finality of it was overwhelming, a tangible sign that this was truly the end. When he came back inside to hand me the divorce papers, his face was an unreadable mask. Signing them felt like signing away a part of myself, each stroke of my name a confirmation of our failed promises. My vision blurred with tears, not just for what we'd lost, but for the realization that we'd never get it back. The end was not dramatic, nor was it filled with angry words or bitter accusations. It was quiet, marked by signed papers and packed boxes, a silent testament to the life we'd built and the love we'd lost. The sound of the door closing behind David echoed through the empty house, a definitive end to our chapter together. Left alone, the silence was deafening, each room a mausoleum of memories we had created together. The walls, once witnesses to our laughter and love, now stood as silent testaments to our downfall. In a moment of desperation, I reached out to Mark, the catalyst of our unraveling. Maybe I sought forgiveness, maybe a distraction, or perhaps a way to fill the void David left. But Mark, like a shadow at dusk, was unreachable, his silence a clear message. I was alone, truly alone, having lost not just my husband but any semblance of solace Mark could have offered. The digital world where David now existed was a constant reminder of what I'd lost. His social media was a window into a life that no longer included me, filled with smiles and adventures that we were supposed to have together. Each update was a punch to the gut, a visual representation of the gap between our present realities. Work became a battleground, with memories of David lurking around every corner, turning tasks that once demanded my full attention into mountains I couldn't climb. My productivity plummeted, and with it, my self-esteem. It was as if I was losing my grasp on everything that defined me, piece by piece. Our friends, once mutual, slowly retreated into the background, their loyalties lying with David. Invitations dwindled, and casual check-ins ceased, leaving me to navigate the aftermath of our divorce in solitude. The vibrant social life we once shared had disintegrated, leaving me isolated in its wake. A chance encounter with David's family at a friend's gathering was a stark reminder of the ripple effects of our split. Polite smiles and strained conversations replaced the warmth and inclusivity I once took for granted. It was clear I was no longer part of their family, just a distant memory of a chapter closed. Nights were the hardest. Sleep eluded me, leaving me to wrestle with the ghosts of our past. The bed felt too big, the nights too long, and my thoughts too loud. I was haunted by the loss of David, the love we shared, and the future we'd planned. Walking past our favorite restaurant, now shuttered and abandoned, felt symbolic of our love story, once vibrant and full of life, now closed down and left behind. The sight unleashed a torrent of memories, each one a reminder of what I had lost, what I had thrown away. The weight of my choices, my mistakes, bore down on me, leaving me to wonder if the pain would ever subside, if I would ever find forgiveness, not from David, but from myself. The world of dating felt alien to me, like I was a tourist in a country where I didn't speak the language. Each date was a mirror reflecting what I had lost, every conversation a reminder that no one could fill the void David left. It wasn't their fault. They laughed, they shared, they tried. But against my will, my mind kept drawing parallels, comparisons where none could truly measure up to the memories I cherished of him. Our anniversary came and went, a day that once promised joy and celebration now marred by the shadow of my choices. I spent it alone, the weight of the silence around me almost tangible. It was a day of reflection, of mourning what we had lost, a love that was supposed to last a lifetime but didn't. Then came the wedding invitation, a beautiful card that felt like a taunt in my hands. Attending meant watching others bask in the happiness that once was mine, a happiness I sabotaged. I was happy for them, truly, but their joy was a stark contrast to the solitude that had become my constant companion. It deepened the chasm of my loss, the stark reality of my situation. When I saw David's success sprawled across the pages of a business magazine, my heart swelled with pride for the man he had become, a man thriving in the aftermath of our disaster. Yet, that pride was laced with sorrow, knowing I no longer had a place in his world, that his achievements were no longer ours to celebrate together. Standing in the empty house we once called home, I was struck by the profound silence, a silence that echoed the emptiness of my heart. The walls, stripped of our photos, our memories, stood bare, a stark reminder of what was and what could never be again. It was here, in the quiet aftermath of our life together, that the full weight of my actions settled on my shoulders. I realized that this was the end of a chapter, the closing of a book I had never intended to finish so soon. The future stretched out before me, a blank canvas that David would no longer be a part of. My choices, my betrayal, had irrevocably shaped my destiny, leaving me to navigate a path I had never envisioned, a future I had to face. The sun was already dipping low in the sky when we finally packed the last of our bags into the car. My husband, barely looking up from his phone, managed a brief, "Ready?" It felt more like we were heading to a business meeting than a weekend getaway. The drive was quiet, too quiet. Every now and then, I'd try to start a conversation, but it felt like I was talking to a brick wall. His mind was somewhere else, probably tangled up in work emails and deadlines. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness, remembering a time when we'd sing along to the radio, laughing and making plans. Now, it seemed like we were just sharing space, nothing more. Arriving at the cabin felt like stepping into a postcard. It was beautiful, surrounded by trees with leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. "This is nice," I said, hoping to break the ice. He nodded, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The distance between us felt like a chasm that no scenic view could bridge. The first night was as awkward as expected. We made small talk over dinner, but the silences were heavy, loaded with things unsaid. Later, in bed, we faced opposite walls, the silence deafening. Morning came too soon. I was greeted by the sound of his voice, not saying good morning to me, but speaking briskly on a work call. I felt a surge of frustration. Here we were, in this beautiful place, and yet we might as well have been 1,000 miles apart. I decided to get some air, hoping the forest could offer what my husband couldn't, peace. At the local store, stocking up on things we'd forgotten, I bumped into Alex. Alex, with that same easy smile and warm eyes that could light up the darkest days. We caught up, laughed, and for a moment, I felt a spark of something familiar, something exciting. It was a dangerous feeling, like playing with fire, but it reminded me that I wasn't just a wife or a background character in someone else's busy life. I was me. Returning to the cabin, I felt a mix of emotions. Guilt for the thrill I felt with Alex. Sadness for the state of my marriage. Determination to not let this weekend be a waste. I wanted to shake my husband, to scream, "Look at me. I'm here, we're here, and we're slipping away from each other." But I knew it wasn't that simple. The getaway was supposed to reconnect us, but now I wasn't sure what it would take. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. It was time for a change, but how and what remained to be seen. I told him I needed some fresh air, a hike by myself to sort through my thoughts. He didn't question it, just nodded, his eyes glued to his laptop screen. I felt a twinge in my chest, not sure if it was guilt or relief that he didn't press further. Meeting Alex wasn't something I had planned, not really, but once the idea took hold, it was all I could think about. The cafe was quaint, tucked away on a street I'd never have found without Alex suggesting it. Seeing him there, waiting, something in me relaxed for the first time in months. We talked like old times, his attention on me felt like a balm. I laughed more in that hour than I had in weeks. It was easy to forget, to get lost in the moment. Returning to the cabin was like stepping back into another world. My husband barely looked up as I walked in. "Good walk?" he asked, and I nodded, hating the ease with which the lie slipped out. I showered, letting the guilt wash over me, but it didn't rinse away. He was still working when I joined him in the living area, the glow of the screen illuminating his focused face. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between us, but the words wouldn't come. The days that followed blurred into a pattern of deceit. Each meeting with Alex was a step further away from my husband. I told myself it was just coffee, just lunch, just talking, but I knew it was more. I could feel the distance growing, an emotional chasm that widened with every lie, every stolen moment. My husband's oblivion was a double-edged sword. Part of me wished he'd notice, confront me, fight for us. But he remained absorbed in his work, unaware of the storm brewing under our roof. It was easier this way, I told myself, easier to slip further into the affair. With each passing day, my emotional ties to my husband frayed. It wasn't just the physical betrayal, it was the secrets, the lies, the parts of myself I gave to Alex instead of him. I was losing myself in the deception, each layer of dishonesty distancing me further from the woman I once was. I knew this couldn't last, that the truth would come out eventually. But for now, I was caught in the thrill of the moment, the intoxication of being wanted, seen, in a way I hadn't felt in years. The guilt was always there, lurking in the background, but I pushed it away, convincing myself that I could navigate this tangled web I'd woven. It was a dangerous game, one I wasn't sure I could win, but I was too far in to turn back now. That morning, he was off work, which hardly ever happens. He wanted us to do something together, but I was already miles away in my head, thinking about the weekend. I told him about this wellness retreat I heard from a friend, saying it was something I needed to do alone. He looked disappointed, but he didn't push it. Meeting Alex was becoming the new normal, each time a bit more bold, a bit more reckless. I spun a web of lies to cover my tracks, each one more elaborate than the last. It was like I was someone else, living a double life. One day, while out with Alex, I bumped into a friend. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in suspicion. We talked, and I could see the judgment in her eyes, but she promised she wouldn't tell. Walking away from that conversation, my stomach was in knots. It was getting too close for comfort. Then, there were the expenses. Little things here and there, but they added up. My husband noticed. "What's all this?" he asked, scrolling through our bank statement. "Just some things for myself," I said, trying to sound casual. "Self-care, you know?" He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. The tension in the air was thick, though, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The day he found the gift from Alex was the day everything nearly came crashing down. It was just a small thing, a necklace, but it was enough. "Who's this from?" he asked, holding it up. My heart stopped. "Oh, that? It's from Lisa." I lied, mentioning a friend he rarely met. "She thought I could use a pick-me-up." He studied me for a moment, then nodded, though I could see the wheels turning in his head. Our home felt like a battleground, silent and charged. I could see the frustration in his eyes, feel the distance growing between us. I was living a lie, and it was only a matter of time before it all came out. I wanted to stop, to go back to how things were, but I didn't know how. It was like being caught in a current, unable to swim back to shore. The day started like any other, but there was something in the air, a kind of tension I couldn't quite put my finger on. He was quiet at breakfast, more than usual, his eyes on me in a way that felt like he was looking right through me. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just work stress. Little did I know, he had started putting his detective skills to use, watching me closer than ever before. It never even crossed my mind he would do something like that. Why would he? I thought I had been careful, thought I had covered my tracks. But I underestimated him, underestimated what he was capable of when his instincts kicked in. Then there was the day he ran into my friend, the one who had seen me with Alex. I didn't know about their meeting until much later, but when he came home that night, there was a look in his eyes I couldn't quite decipher. Something had shifted, and deep down, I started to feel the first twinges of fear. Using his interrogation skills, he started asking questions. Not directly about Alex or the affair, but little things, probing, testing my answers. I felt like I was constantly on the edge, trying to balance on a tightrope of my own lies. He had been gathering evidence, something I was blissfully unaware of. In my world, wrapped up in the excitement and danger of the affair, I forgot who I was dealing with. A detective, someone trained to see what others miss, to connect dots that on the surface don't seem to connect at all. The special dinner invitation caught me off guard. "I think we need this, just the two of us," he said, and part of me wanted to believe it was a step towards fixing whatever had broken between us. I missed what we had before all the lies and secrets. So, I said yes, hoping for a night where we could pretend everything was okay. Sitting across from him at that dinner, the atmosphere was charged with an unspoken tension. He was calm, too calm, and it was then I realized this wasn't a dinner to rekindle our relationship. This was something else entirely. The moment of truth, the confrontation I hadn't seen coming but should have. All the lies, the sneaking around, it was all about to come crashing down. And there I was, completely unprepared for the fallout. We sat down for what was supposed to be a special dinner, just the two of us trying to reconnect. But the moment he started speaking, I knew this wasn't about rekindling anything. He laid it all out, every piece of evidence he had gathered about the affair. Photos, messages, receipts. I couldn't believe it. How did it all come to this? At first, I tried to deny it, to make up some story to explain everything away. But it was useless. He had everything laid out so clearly, so methodically, there was no room for doubt. The look in his eyes, it wasn't anger, not really. It was hurt, deep hurt, and disappointment. That's what got me. I broke down, admitting to everything. It felt like the world was falling apart around us. The emotional fallout was immediate and devastating. We both sat there, in a kind of stunned silence, the air heavy with everything that had just been laid bare. Our marriage, once something so strong and certain, now felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Then came the ultimatum. It was simple and stark. End the affair and commit to counseling, or it was over, divorce. I felt like I was at a crossroads, not just about our marriage, but about who I wanted to be. I chose to end the affair and try to mend what I had broken. Telling Alex was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not because I wanted to stay with him, but because it made everything so real. Ending it. Hearing the finality in my voice, it was like waking up from a dream. A very bad dream. The counseling sessions were tough, each one a step through the pain and betrayal. But we were doing it together, working through the layers of hurt and mistrust. It wasn't easy. There were days I thought it was too much, that we couldn't get past it. But then there were moments, small ones, where I could see us, the real us, starting to emerge again. It was a long road, filled with ups and downs. But that confrontation, as painful as it was, started us on the path to healing. It was a reminder of how much we had to lose, and what we were fighting to save. After everything that happened, after the confrontation and the tears, we started the slow process of rebuilding. It wasn't like flipping a switch, it was more like trying to piece together a shattered vase, knowing it would never look the same again. But maybe, we thought, it could still hold water, still be beautiful in its own way. Trust, that was the biggest hurdle. Every time he looked at me, I could see the shadow of doubt in his eyes. It hurt, knowing I was the cause of that. We had long talks, the kind where every word weighed a ton, trying to lay a new foundation for our relationship. It was exhausting, trying to rebuild trust brick by brick. We set new rules, new boundaries for our relationship. Communication was the key, we kept hearing from our counselor. So, we talked and talked, even when it was the last thing we wanted to do. It felt like walking a tightrope, trying to find the balance between honesty and too much information. To bring back some spark, some joy, we started doing new things together. Hiking on weekends, taking a cooking class, anything to feel connected again. It was awkward at first, like we were strangers trying to be friends. But slowly, laughter returned, filling up the empty spaces between us. I also started seeing a therapist on my own. I needed to understand why I did what I did, why I risked everything for something that was never real. It was hard, facing those ugly parts of myself, but necessary. I couldn't fix us if I didn't fix me first. Our lives became an open book. No more secrets, no more lies. It was scary, living like that, but also liberating. There was a comfort in knowing that there was nothing left to hide, that the worst had already happened and we were still here, still trying. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It was more like a slow thaw after a harsh winter, bits of green emerging from the snow. There were good days and bad days, days when the hurt seemed too much to bear, and days when hope felt within reach. But gradually, the good days started to outnumber the bad. It wasn't easy, rebuilding from the ashes of our old life. But piece by piece, we were doing it. Forgiveness, we learned, wasn't just a moment of grace but a journey we were walking together. And with each step, we were coming closer to something new, something stronger. The day we renewed our vows was quiet, just us and a few close family members. It wasn't like the first time, with all the fuss and the big white dress. This time, it was more real, more about us and the commitment we were making to move forward, together. Standing there, repeating those vows, it felt like we were acknowledging everything we'd been through and still choosing each other. Our families were our rock, always there, offering a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen. It amazed me how much strength you can draw from the people who love you, even when you feel like you're at your lowest. We started setting new routines, making sure we dedicated time just for us, whether it was a date night or just a quiet evening at home. It was about making us a priority again, showing that we both wanted this to work. Intimacy was another thing, it didn't come back all at once, like flipping a switch. It was slow, sometimes awkward, but there was a new depth to it. It felt like we were getting to know each other all over again, but in a deeper, more meaningful way. Talking about the issues that led to the affair was tough. It meant opening up about things we'd both rather forget, but it was necessary. We had to face what happened head-on, understand it, so we could move past it. The idea of another getaway could have been a trigger, but we approached it differently this time. It was about healing, about finding that connection again. And surprisingly, it worked. Being away from the everyday stresses, just focusing on us, it reminded me of why we fell in love in the first place. That getaway was a turning point. We laughed more, talked more, and I could feel the love that had been buried under all the hurt and anger slowly coming back to the surface. Looking towards the future now, it's with a sense of hope. I won't pretend it's all fixed, that everything's perfect. But we're both committed to this journey, to rebuilding what we have. It's going to be long and probably not easy, but for the first time in a long time, it feels possible. We're moving forward, together, and that's what